So with that, we will unpack the sustainability topic a bit and so much more with my next guest, who is Darrell Wade. Darrell, if you haven't met him before, is co-founder and chairman of Intrepid Travel, but he is so much more than that. Actually, Intrepid Travel, and we'll talk about this a little bit, is the world's largest travel-related certified B Corporation. So we'll learn what that is about. Darrell and Jeff Manchester founded Intrepid in the late 1980s as a new way for people to explore the world that was immersive, sustainable, and gave back to the communities that they visited. Today, Darrell works with new and growing companies, in addition to lots of other things, serving as an advocate for responsible tourism. He is vice chair of the World Travel and Trade Council, the WTTC, World Travel and Tourism Council, sorry, and chair of the Intrepid Foundation. He is also chair of Travalyst, which has been in the news just very recently as a new IATA partner, so that is big news. We'll talk about that. It's an initiative that was established, of course, I think with the help of Darrell as well, but well known as Prince Harry's project, the Duke of Sussex, to increase travel industry sustainability. So please welcome to the PATA-GBTA stage, Darrell Wade. Welcome.
Let's do that.
All right. Wow, how was your trip here?
Great. Yeah, so you mentioned the WTTC, and I was in Riyadh for our annual conference just last week. So it's only a short hop from there, really, but no, terrific. Well,
Good.
I'm Australian. You know, everywhere is a short hop that's less than about 10 hours.
It's all relative.
It's that. That's right. Exactly.
I think the kind of travel you've been doing, and you came here via
Oman.
Yeah. Not exactly a straight route.
A little way out of the way.
How many countries have you visited? Do you keep track?
I haven't for a while. I think it was 120 last time I counted, but could be a bit north of that now.
Thank you. We do know, so let's start with, I think, Certified B Corp. What is that, and why was that important for Intrepid to get that designation?
Yeah, so B Corp is it's a legal structure that companies can adopt, and then in addition to that, they can become B Corps themselves. There's two kind of parts to it. And it means that rather than just taking a traditional fiduciary relationship from shareholders to the companies, in other words, that the prima facie return of a company is for shareholders, it's broadening that out and looking at all stakeholders, so your employees, local communities, customers, and all stakeholders that the company touches. And so why for Intrepid? It was because as my partner and I, two founders, we kind of thought, well, you know, we've been kind of custodians, if you like, of the company for a long time, but hopefully it'll go on for a lot longer than us. And so from our perspective, B Corp was a great way to really embed into the legacy of the organization those values, so that if we don't want to work anymore, or you know, we drop off the perch, then hopefully the company will continue to behave in the same way that we've always valued.
Instilling the values.
Yeah, that's it.
Long term.
And you know, we got involved with it about 6 years ago, and I've got to say it's been absolutely fantastic. And not just for us, but also for our staff. Probably, I'm not sure it relates so much to customers, but certainly the staff are 100% behind it.
Yeah, I think sustainability means so much, and that is certainly one of the definitions of sustainability as well.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
I think, speaking of sustainability, you've been part of this journey, literally, for a while. What have you seen?
You're making me feel old.
No, me too. I mean, yeah. But in the last 5 years, have you seen, do you have more hope? Are there things that are happening in a way that give you hope that we can actually do this?
Look, it's an interesting question. I think, you know, I'm an optimistic person, so I guess I've always had hope. But for a while there, up until a couple of years ago, I was starting to just get slightly despondent, because you go to conferences, and I'll use the WTTC as an example, where I've been involved there for about 7 years, I suppose, and every year you go to conference, and there'll be a speaker on sustainability and a little bit of noise, but to be honest, it's just talk, and nothing was actually meaningfully happening. And But about 12, 18 months ago, that really did start to change, and that talk around awareness, should we do this, what do we do, how do we do it, all the vagueness of that really dropped down into some methodology and thinking about it and processes and how. And so, yeah, in fact, just again last week at WTTC, WTTC is primarily around employment, jobs, industry strength, relationship with governments and so forth, and generally sponsoring the industry to grow and facilitating that growth. The number one topic last week, unquestionably, was sustainability. It was just everywhere, from government speakers, from organisational speakers, company speakers, and it's real now. It's not just talk, it's actually dropping down. Here's what we do, here's how we do it, this is how we measure, and away we go. So,
does it start with measurement? Is that your view?
Look, as business people, it kind of has to start at measurement, doesn't it? And businesses, generally speaking, are good at measuring. We set a goal to do something, we allocate resources to it, we measure, of course, because you don't know how you're going unless you're measuring. So yeah, measurement is absolutely critical.
I know for any corporate travel managers in the room, it's what their day job is.
That's what we all do. That's what we all do.
And you don't know where your goal is if you're not measuring your track there.
100%.
Certainly, COP was happening in nearby in the region as well, so the whole world was thinking about sustainability as it was going on.
And I think COP26, the previous COP in Glasgow, that was probably one of the real penny drop moments, I think, for our industry to realise that, yeah, things had changed. And that whole adoption of the net zero by 2050, whilst 2050 seems like a long time away, we also had that 2030 impetus that we've got to reduce emissions by half by 2030. That really galvanised the industry. The airlines really came on board in particular. And so, yeah, that's been instrumental in the change of thinking.
So let's pivot to Travalyst then, which is in that space. Can you let the audience know what is Travalyst?
Sure.
I don't think it's just Prince Harry's pet project. You clearly have a
no,
a lot more.
He's dragged me into it now, so it's my pet project. Yeah, so Travalyst, in its essence, is taking that concept that you mentioned about measurement, and we've looked at it and said, well, look, how do we get systemic change in the travel industry to create a more sustainable industry, but also to enable customers to make better choices on their buying decisions. And so, as Liz was saying earlier, we know the data is really clear that customers do want to make more sustainable choices. But customers don't necessarily know how. It's quite tricky. What does a sustainable hotel look like? What is a more sustainable airline or route or whatever? It's tricky, and the devil is in the detail, and there's a lot of detail in this. So at Travalyst, we're saying, okay, well, look, let's try and simplify this for the customer and also enable supply chains to work better through a unified methodology. So we broke it, or the first thing we did was got together 6 founding partners, which were all in kind of fulcrum points of the two-sided marketplace. So on one side, they had huge numbers of customers, and on the other side, really significant supply chains. And then we broke it down, so that those partners are people like Booking.com, Expedia, TripAdvisor, Google, and so forth. We then broke it down into verticals and said, okay, the accommodation vertical has certain characteristics that are similar. Airlines, of course, are very different in terms of their requirements, so that's another vertical. The third one will be tours and activities. We'll get into cruise, car hire, et cetera, and so forth. So taking accommodation, for example, Booking and TripAdvisor led that vertical development with the GSTC, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, acting as our advisors, and we broke that down into 60 attributes, which are binary. We put that through database, we get supply chain then starting to fill out those attributes. We put an algorithm across it and then come up with a scoring methodology so that we can then publish through Google or Booking or whoever it is, that sustainability score. That's the kind of theory of change. And then customers can put their wallet where their mouth was, if you like, and actually choose. And so we're doing beta testing now on the propensity for customers to actually follow through on that level of intent we've seen. And so aviation, as you mentioned, we're just yesterday signed an agreement with IATA. So IATA and Travalyst are working on exactly the same methodology, which in fairness, Google have been doing most of the heavy lifting on in terms of the data crunching and methodology with MIT in the States. So yeah, look, it's getting there, and just the sign up of different organisations and principles is really encouraging, super encouraging.
Well, and what's remarkable is you have some of the world's biggest competitors, the OTAs,
Well,
all in the same room. You have competing GDSs now partnering. Explain the magic, why sustainability isn't something people are competing on.
Well, because, you know, ultimately sustainability, and let's say climate change as one, you know, the kind of almost the elephant in the room. There's really two big issues on sustainability. One is biodiversity, one is climate change. There of course are other issues on human rights and various other things, but they're the two real big ones. They're the real hard ones. Yeah. So climate change, everyone is impacted. Right? It doesn't matter whether you're airline A, airline B, it doesn't matter whether GDS1, GDS2, or an OTA or whatever, everyone is impacted. So in that sense, we've all got a vested interest in solving this. And so we decided, and again, to Prince Harry's genius, this thing was his idea. I've got to, you know, you've got to give this guy credit. He's pretty clever. He just said, look, let's form a pre-competitive alliance where people get in together and they may be competitors, but you recognise that this problem is bigger than your competition, and so you've got to solve it together. And by solving it together through a unified way, you can then speak and present something to a customer that is really simple. Because sustainability is complex. We've got to make it simple for people. And, you know, customers understand a score, and if we can give a hotel a certain number, another hotel another number, you know, and people go, oh, okay, just like feedback rating. That's simple, I get that.
Right, right.
So keep it simple, keep it unified, keep it verified, and keep it to a really high standard.
I think the comparison of competitors at the table is, at GBTA, we also, in the last year, set up a Sustainability Leadership Council, because this is not a topic that even in the corporate space people need to compete on.
That's it.
It's not a marketing
message. It's in all of our interests.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Of those verticals, is it in the order of complexity that you're going through that order?
We made really great early wins with accommodation, and you know, I think that's because Booking.com in particular just really put some muscle into the project for us. Aviation we knew was probably the most important, but was hard. Aviation's really hard, and even though in some ways it's a simpler thing because the emissions is largely the biggest single factor that we're looking to measure there. Nonetheless, different planes on different routes and different load capacities and whatnot have different emission levels. And so what we wanted to do at Travalyst was to take a particular route. So if you're here today and we say, okay, we're in Bangkok and we want to fly to London, who should I fly if I want to take emissions? So right today, you can search that route on Google and you'll see that airline X is 20% below the benchmark, airline Y is only 3% below the benchmark, and that is taking into account what route they're flying, what aircraft they're actually flying on that day that you're choosing, what the expected yield capacity trip fill on that plane is, and so forth, so that we can estimate carbon emissions on that flight that you're looking at. And so then people get a choice and they'll say, okay, well, let's say for a second price is the most important factor. They'll say, oh, okay, so that one is a bit cheaper, that one's a bit dearer. Oh, that one's emissions are a lot lower. Gee, you know what? I think I'll go that one. Yeah. That's the theory of change.
So how does that come into the corporate travel space? So the ecosystem is more complex. Are corporations expressing a demand?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I've got to say we got this wrong at Travalyst. We were assuming that we would target leisure first, because I suppose largely because the OTAs that we're working with have got the voice there. Yeah. Why I say we got it wrong is that in the last 6 months we've really been had our door knocked on several times by corporate partners to say, hey, we actually are getting our customers saying, they want sustainability. You know, you take the big corporates of the world and they've got ESG reporting requirements now, and so that they have to report on. So they want to get data about, you know, which option to take and what their flight emissions are or whatever it is. So yeah, we're just kind of pivoting now, and hence us having a conversation, in fact, a few months ago.
Why I'm interviewing you, yes.
Yeah, that's right. So I think increasingly over the next 6 months, we will really look at corporate travel a lot, because it seems like there is a real need for what we're doing.
Well, there's a need, and there's also that ability for corporate travel programs to amass this bigger spend. A decision by a corporate program has a huge impact rather than a one-to-one consumer decision.
Absolutely.
And the travel managers, again, in the room, or the TMCs that manage that policy for them, are also responsible for pushing them in the right direction and doing the right thing
100%.
for the planet and the company,
100%.
right?
Yep.
What do you expect to learn from the experiments that you're running now on the do-say kind of gap?
Yeah, well, you know, obviously there's something we want to see. Buying decisions change. That's what we would like to see. And so, you know, right now, you know, we're about 4 months into our testing and booking is our really tightest testing framework. So what they're doing is they've got the first phase of our badging. We don't have a score yet. We've got a score, but we aren't publishing it. So if you're looking at a given city, you know, you might be researching hotels in London, for argument's sake. Some hotels will come up as with a travel sustainable stamp. That's all it is, simple as that. And what we're doing now is that classic A/B testing, so that if I'm looking today at hotels in London, I might see a given hotel with a stamp. You might do exactly the same search and you might not see it. And so then we'll see whether there's a higher propensity to book from the people who don't see or the people who do see. Now, clearly the theory of change is that if I see it, I'm more likely to book that hotel, and then at that point, booking can say to the hotel industry, and by the way, Google running the same system, but they're not doing the A/B testing yet. Booking can say to the hotel industry, look, we know that you're more likely to get a booking if you've got a more sustainable program, and so therefore encourage that supply chain to actively adopt better methodology to improve.
Are there any ways to game the system?
There's not. Yeah, no, there's not, and it's a really interesting question actually, and because on the one hand we want to be as transparent as we can with the methodology. On the other hand, we don't want to be as transparent because we might get gamed, and so at this stage, the other important aspect that we haven't talked to is around verification of the system, and there's certain aspects we can verify by either customer feedback or artificial intelligence. There's some areas of the system that we still can't verify yet, short of active one-on-one verification in the hotel. So what we're doing is it's in an algorithm. We are not publicly making available what that algorithm is, so that the hotels will know what the attributes are, but not the methodology behind the attributes.
This is a little bit of a random question, but do you see any space then in not a competing but in a parallel system? Where does carbon tax eventually come in? Is there a carbon tax system that comes into play as part of this?
Carbon tax doesn't come into play for us per se, because we're applying the same methodology across all destinations and in turn over all subsectors. But obviously where
it's more of a philosophical
question. But where it will come into play is we will have talks with government and explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, and clearly if they put in taxes, then their destinations are going to start to come up the metrics rating, and so and we will have conversations at some point around destination sustainability as well as individual hotels, planes, whatever it is.
Will that data ultimately end up in systems that corporates can track so that there is a sense of policy, or that someone shows something that wasn't as sustainable?
It will. We haven't got that far yet.
Sure.
It will, but that's one of the reasons why we're working with GDSs, just to get that flow of information coming through. So Amadeus and Travelport are already on board.
Well done.
So it's a monster of a project, I've got to say, and we're getting there, and we're, you know, the head of STEAM is really quite extraordinary, and I think it's, again, I think we're just filling a bit of a vacuum that's been there. You know,
Yes.
corporates, as you know, have been crying out for this. Customers are saying they want it, but there's been no unified methodology to bring it all together, and so that's what Travalyst is doing.
Our own research, I think in April, said that 89% of corporate travel managers see that lack of measurement standards is the biggest thing holding us back. So,
yeah,
well
and it's confusing. You know, again, this is why we're trying to get as many people in the room in that pre-competitive context as we can, because, you know, if you're a corporate manager or even just a consumer, you don't want 10 different systems. You don't want, you know, all different standards and confusing things that aren't talking to each other. You just want it simple, and you want it verified and authoritative. Keep it simple.
The KISS standard, right? Keep it simple, stupid, although
Totally.
stupid is
Totally.
KISS.
Yep. And I think, you know, us being a not-for-profit with these partners, I think it just gives a level of credibility to it. You know, if we're a for-profit organisation, it changes it.
Of course it does. What do you see, what's your hope for this region in particular, APAC specifically?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, APAC is probably a little bit behind. I mean, in terms of sustainability, Europe is leading the charge. There's just no, they've been doing it for a long time. They're ahead of the curve. APAC, I think, is a little bit behind the curve, but as is so often the case with APAC, it starts a little bit further behind, and then all of a sudden, one's up on top. I mean, how often have we seen that over the years, huh?
Indeed, with mobile phones, with everything.
Oh, everything. It's just, it's the way it is. So whilst, yes, it's a little bit behind, I'm actually not worried at all.
Okay. So the great hope.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Well, I think on that note of optimism, I will say thank you. It was a big education class. Darrell will be around all day. Please pepper him with questions. He is the most approachable founder that I've spoken to in a long time.
You're too kind.
So super pleased to have you here. Thank you, Darrell Wade.
Thanks, Suzanne. That's great. Oh,
We'll do
do the hug. Cheers.
Thank you.